Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to World of Tanks Blitz, and today we're going to be doing a garage review of the M3 Light, a Tier 3 Russian premium light tank. Because, I've done videos on it with replays, but I haven't actually done a video of a garage review of this thing, and somebody asked me to, and I thought, why not? So what we've got here is we have essentially, we've got to consider when this tank was first introduced into the game to see as to why it's placed here. So the M3 Light was in the game from probably the very start of the game, and at the time its comparable Tier 3 tank, the comparable Tier 3 tank to it prior to update 5.5 in the American line was the M3 Stuart, because the M3 Stuart used to be the Tier 3 American light tank. So this thing was the same tier as the M3 Light, because if you notice, the M3 Stuart is the M3 Light, and the M3 Light is the M3 Stuart, just with some changed around stats and a different gun. Because it is a Russian Lend-Lease vehicle, which is why it's in the Soviet tech tree here. So this thing was, prior to update 5.5, competing with the M3 Stuart, rather than what it currently is, which is competing against the M5 Stuart, which, as you will see, is a completely different looking tank. If I can, there you go. As you can see, it is an entirely different vehicle. This thing was originally Tier 4. It was not at Tier 3. Instead, the M3 Stuart was at Tier 3, and as you can see, this is basically the exact same tank. Okay, very simple. Update 5.5 comes around, Wargaming chops off the existing Tier 1 tanks, moves a bunch of tanks one tier lower to fill in those new gaps in order to streamline it. And that's why the M3 Stuart is now here, and the M5, which is why the M3 Light is here, but the M3 Stuart isn't. Okay, with that all out of the way, it is essentially a Tier 3 tank at a Tier 3 level, whereas the M3 Stuart is a Tier 3 tank at a Tier 2 level. And it also means that this thing is kind of outclassed by the current Tier 3 tanks, namely the Panzer and the M5 Stuart. Because if we have a look here, 500 HP with 38 frontal turret, 25 side and rear, 38 frontal hull, 25 side and rear is not that great. Coming up to 40 millimeters of armor is not too bad, but then again, something like the Cruiser has already got 40 frontal hull and 45 frontal turret. The Panzer, obviously, everyone's seal clubbing tank of choice, alongside of the M5 Stuart, is 59 frontal turret, 54 frontal hull. Okay. Panzer S35, for example, 61 frontal turret and 39 frontal hull, with all of its sloping and whatnots. And what do the French have? The French have the D2, I think. Which, if we have a look here, 39 frontal turret, 40 frontal hull. With the upgraded turret, it goes up to 45. So the M3 Light does not have the armour advantage. The T-70-57 has got 35 frontal turret and 35 frontal hull, plus that is a pretty extreme frontal sloping angle going on there with the front of the hull. So already it's not looking too great for our little tank here. Even though it does have some sloping at the front here, that only gets its armour up to about, 42-ish, maybe, millimeters of armour at the most, and then this, even though it is at a pretty steep sloping angle, it is still pretty thin, because it is not 38 millimeters. It's actually a lot thinner. It's probably more like 15 or something, and then obviously the lower glacis is still going to be the weak spot. And obviously the sides at 25 is still not particularly great either. So armour-wise, it's not too great. Mobility-wise, 38 kilometers an hour average speed with a 23.4 power to weight. 41 degrees per second turret and 45 degrees per second hull traverse. That's not too bad. If we again have a look at something like the T-70-57, 28, 13, 40, 49. So the M3 has got it beaten on that. You know, something like the Cruiser, for example, 41 average speed, 25 kilometers per hour with a better hull and turret traverse. It's not going to be as fast as or as mobile as something like the Cruiser. Something like the Panzer, though, let's see if it can beat the Panzer. 37, 21, 41, 50. Let me just have a 38, 23. $37.21. So it is ever so slightly better than the Panzer. However, we also need to have a consideration to the American offering here, which is the M5 Stuart. The M5, with its maximum engine, gets a 41 kilometers per hour average speed with a 26 kilometers per hour average power to weight. So it is already looking a lot better. Hull-wise, only 29 on the front of the hull. However, the front of the hull is at a pretty steep 45-ish degree angle, which actually gives it more effectively double that. So it's probably approaching more to sort of 50, 60 millimeters of thickness instead of the 29 that it's currently on offer. So maybe less than that, but still 45. It's still better than the M3 Light. And turret-wise, even with the stock turret, we're looking at 45 frontal with 31-30. It's already better. If we put the upgraded turret on, it goes up to 55 and 32 side. So already the M5 Stuart is looking a lot better in terms of armor-wise, and also kind of mobility-wise. It's beating out the M3 Light. If we were to have a look at the M3 Stuart, however, the M3 Stuart 42 frontal hull, which is a lot more comparably similar. 21 side, 26 rear. That's looking a lot more like what we're seeing in the M3 Light. Something like the turret, however, the turret has got the M3 Light beat, 47, 42, 36. It is better. Mobility-wise, though, looking a lot similar. 40, 27, 37, 50. It's a lot more comparable to the M3 Light rather than the M5 Stuart, which is currently sitting at the same tier as this thing somehow. And it doesn't help the gun that we have. So the thing about this tank is that the gun is not very good. That was kind of like the drawback of the Russian Lend-Lease vehicles, is that their guns typically aren't that great in the Russian tech tree. So what the gun here, it is the gun M5, it is still the American gun. However, it's got a 2.5 second aim time. If we just put it here, 3.5 second reload time, 52 average pen, 74 with APCR, no HE obviously tier 2, 55 average damage, 45 with APCR, 2.5 second aim time, 0.34 dispersion, 10 degrees of gun depression. You know, that's not too bad. If we compare it, however, to something like the T7057, which has got a worse reload time but a lot better penetration, a lot better average damage, slightly worse aim time and slightly worse dispersion with the similar with a similar gun depression, or exactly the same gun depression. You know, something like the LTP has got worse reload time, however it has got better average pen, better average damage, similar aim time, a lot worse accuracy. But the common theme that we're seeing here is that the tanks at this tier have got a lot better penetration. You know, 65, 101, 50, 45, better accuracy and aim time. Obviously worse magazine though, and better gun depression. The Cruiser's gun is just better. You know, then, you know, something like the Panzer III-A has got, you know, 76, worse reload time obviously, but better pen, better damage, similar aim time, worse dispersion. Worse accuracy. The M3's gun is great handling wise, but penetration wise, it's not looking that great. You know, the 52 average pen with AP is not too bad. They might have buffed it from how it was pre 5.5, but even so, 52 average pen. 52 average pen is not enough to deal with the seal clubbing tanks of choice, which is the Panzer and the M3 Stuart. The M5 Stuart, especially not at range, you know. 54 frontal hull, even at point blank, you're not getting through there. Same with the front of the turret, even point blank, you're not getting through. You have to switch to APCR. which is not great, because people at low tier probably don't know about the existence of premium alloy. And again, if we look at the M5 Stuart, even though it has got 29 hull, that is a pretty extreme sloping angle. Your 52mm of pen probably isn't going to get through that. Even with APCR, if I remember correctly, APCR doesn't do particularly great with sloped armour. That's kind of its weakness. Heat is absorbed by spaced armour. Sloped armour makes ricocheting a lot more likely with APCR. So you're trying to take this thing on from the front. Point blank, you might get through the front of the turret with AP. You may be able to get through the front of the hull with AP as well at point blank. However, at ranged, you're really going to need to switch to APCR, and unless you can get them sort of side on, you're going to struggle. And that's what makes these tanks so efficient at seal clubbing. And yeah, they're not going to have any problems getting through you at all, with a better aim time, similar accuracy, better DPS, worse reload time obviously, but better AP, better damage. Generally just a better, bigger gun. Which means your armour's not going to be counting for anything against tanks at this tier. At this tier, very few things are going to struggle to get through your armour. Mobility-wise, pretty good, not top of the class, but still pretty good. And gun-wise, not that great. You're going to struggle to penetrate some tier 3s. You're going to struggle against a lot of the tier 4s, which we haven't even talked about, but trying to take on these things like the M5A1 Stuart. This is where the M5 Stuart was, by the way, in this lineup. This is where the M5 Stuart was, as you can see from the fact that the M5A1 Stuart in the Chinese tech tree is still here. The M5 Stuart is a tier lower for some reason, but you're going to have no chance to get through the AMX. Even with APCR, you're going to not get through some parts of the Matilda. The B1 as well, you're going to struggle to get through. Same with the Panzer B2. A32, that sloped armour, you're going to struggle. The Grizzly, good luck. APCR is your only chance. Same with something like the DW2. And yes, sure, I'm bringing up all of these heavily armoured tanks, but that's what a lot of this tier is because of the thinning of the tech tree. Look, Hetzer, yeah, good luck with that going up against it from the front. You're going to have to try and flank that. The Panzer IV, yeah, the Panzer IV's pretty weak armour, but the M7, the M8A1, the Electo is not going to cause you much problems, but the Matilda, that will. The Chihi, yeah, even that, 50 frontal turret, 55 frontal hull, you're not getting through that with AP. You're going to have to use APCR, which is, just not great. The tank has fallen off because of update 5.5 and age, but mostly update 5.5. It's not as good as it once was, and it wasn't the greatest of tanks, even in its heyday. But it was a lot more viable, as were a lot of these tanks before update 5.5. But yeah, mobility-wise, fine, pretty good. I would even go as far as to say, armor-wise, middling. It's not the worst. The worst is something like the Gross Tractor, or even worse, the medium, medium 3. But yeah, the gun-wise though, it's not that great. And just to show that, let's have a look at the M3 Stuart, which is at tier 2. And let's have a look at its top gun. Similar aim time, similar accuracy, similar DPS, similar reload time. Very similar average pen with AP, and it doesn't even get APCR. And it's basically the same average damage, except you just have the benefit of being able to use APCR to actually deal with something like a Panzer or an M5 Stuart. These guys don't get that option. And once again, this is the tier. This was at R tier. It has been nerfed by taking it down a tier. But yeah, this was at R tier. We're now a relic of the past, locked in tier 3, when really what Wargaming should have done is also lowered us to tier 2, because then it would keep in with it, but instead they kept us here, and keeping us here was just a generally bad idea, because we're struggling now. The tank is not as good as it once was because of the tanks that it's now going up against, and the fact that generally it shouldn't be going up against these things at its own tier. So yeah, we're in a sort of struggling tank. Ammo-wise, we do have a lot of ammo to burn through, so you can continue to, blaze away at people. Consumables-wise, we only have 2 slots for 2 options. We've got the multi-purpose restoration, which is your fire first aid repair kit. Then you have your engine power boost for 20% engine power for 12 seconds. So, yeah, we at least have got those 2 going for us, but that's the same as what everyone else does at this tier. As for equipment-wise, oh yeah, by the way, I'm using calibrated shells here. If I take off calibrated shells, our gun only has 48mm of average pen and 70 with APCR. The 70 APCR is the issue because it means against something like a Matilda we are quite literally not going to kill it, because we just do not have the penetration. Even with, calibrated shells, we do have a slightly better chance at 74, but even so, as much use as gunner ammo would be, you need calibrated shells for this tank because of the gun. Improved modules is just generally a good thing to have. The track durability and decreased damage when rammed. You don't really need defense system here. I just find improved modules to be more useful for the track durability. And you are a light tank, so coated optics are going to be more use to us rather than the camo net. Enhanced gun lane drive is nice. However, once again, because of the poor penetration of the gun that we're using, you need supercharger. Not necessarily for the shell velocity, but for the penetration decrease over distance. That will generally make our fire more effective at a distance, because even at range, we're not going to get through the hull of the cruiser or the Keeney or, maybe even the medium, because of that penetration drop-off. Something like the Gross Tractor could be a mouse for all we care at medium to long ranges, because we just do not have the penetration to deal with it. So, there you go. So you're going to want supercharger for this gun. There's no other way about it. You could go with enhanced armor, which is what I'm going with, but I'll be honest, I think improved assembly is actually going to be more useful to us, because the plus 3% even to hull and turret armor is not going to be of any use to us with how little armor we comparatively have. Improved assembly is going to be of more use for the extra HP. And engine accelerator for the engine power just generally gives us better power to weight, better hull traverse. Even though the hull traverse rate here would be quite nice, the power to weight is just generally better for climbing hills and whatnot. We don't really need refined gun, because 0.32 accuracy, or whatever it is, 0.34 accuracy, that's pretty good. You don't really need refined gun. And anyway, you're not a sniper, purely because of the low penetration, and also because of that low penetration, you're not going to be hitting people from the front. Typically, you're not going to want to try to, at least. You're going to want to try and get around the sides and rears, and that means you're not really going to be in sniper mode trying to aim. You're going to be sort of circling them around in the third-person mode. So avert stabs are going to be more useful. It does slightly improve our aim time, but mostly we want it for the during movement bonus. That's what we want it for. And then enhanced tracks, yeah, why not? Makes the tracks even more durable. Why not? I mean, mobility is your greatest strength in this tank, so enhanced tracks is going to be more useful, I think, to toolbox, and then your choice of whatever the hell these 2 things are. So, overall, the M3 Lite. It is a relic from the past. It's not that great. I'm not sure how often it comes on sale. It definitely doesn't come up in the Battle Pass at all. The Battle Pass tends to be rotation of the 38NA, the DW2, the AMX, sort of old tech tree tanks. It tends to be either the Covenanter, possibly the Valentine, the DW, the Panzer, or the AMX. Nothing else really comes into rotation with the Battle Pass, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, so it doesn't appear in the Battle Pass, and I'm not sure if it even gets sold in the shop anymore. So if you do have it, keep hold of it. It is a collector's tank. It is also probably a pretty rare collector's tank to have. And if you did sell it, why not try and claim it back? You can do it from Wargaming Store, and I think it costs under 200 gold, probably even less than that. It may even be under 100 gold. I'm not too sure on what the exchange rate is for it, but you know, get it back if you can. Yeah, it's just a nice thing to have in the garage, even if it is not that great anymore, because its competitors have all been moved to the tier below, where they can happily fight each other and tier 1s without a care in the world, while we are stuck here in our old tank, which is just unfortunately not good for the current meta since update 5.5, which was probably like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago or something. But yeah, so that is the review. There'll be no gameplay for this either, because I don't want to sit in a queue for 5 minutes to try and play this tank with, you know, how little people play at these low tiers. So, you know, stats wise, and I do have gameplay on the channel as well, if you just search it up, M3 Lite. Yeah, it's just, yeah, unfortunately not good anymore. It may have been at one time, but not anymore. So I will thank you all for watching, and goodbye.